The first time Jake saw the ghost, it was 1 in the morning at the McDonald's on Maple Avenue. The store was closed, the doors were locked, and the chairs in the lobby were flipped upside down on the tables like sleeping insects. The fryers were off, the grill was dark, and the only light came from the kitchen and the front counter, buzzing softly like tired bees. It should have felt calm. Instead, the whole building felt like it was holding its breath. Jake stood crammed into the tiny back office with 3 other people. Emily hugged her arms tight to her chest, trying to stop herself from shaking. Marcus, who usually laughed at everything, was quiet for once, staring at the monitor like it might bite him. Their manager, Mr. Harris, had his hand on the computer mouse, and Jake could see the sweat shining on his fingers. One by one, Mr. Harris clicked through the security cameras until he stopped and whispered, "Watch camera 3, the lobby." On the screen, camera 3 showed the empty dining room. Just rows of tables and metal chairs, the glowing play area windows, and the soda machine standing alone under the dim lights. No people. No customers. No movement. It was the kind of scene Jake had seen every night at closing, but now, in the silence of the office, it felt strange and wrong, like someone had taken the sound out of the world. Then one of the chairs moved. It didn't slide slowly, the way it would if someone bumped it. It jerked. The metal legs scraped across the tile floor in a way Jake could almost hear, even though the camera had no sound. Emily whispered, "There's no one there," but another chair slid back by itself, then another, and then another. One by one, 4 chairs pulled away from the table and turned out, as if 4 invisible people had just sat down together for a meal that never ended. Jake's skin prickled as his brain tried to explain what he was seeing. Maybe there was a glitch. Maybe someone had forgotten to lock the doors and a late customer had slipped in. Maybe there was some trick with the floor. His mind kept reaching for normal answers that just weren't there. The dining room was supposed to be empty. The doors were locked. The alarm was on. Every part of the system said, "safe," and yet every part of Jake's body said the opposite. Then the soda machine in the corner of the screen started to flicker. One button lit up, then another, blinking in a strange little rhythm like fingers tapping a pattern. It looked exactly like someone was running their hand across the drink choices, pressing them for fun, but no one was standing there. The bright buttons flashed against the empty room, and the machine glowed like a strange little altar in a place that was supposed to just sell fries and burgers. Mr. Harris swallowed hard and clicked to camera 4, the one that watched the narrow hallway leading to the freezer and the break room. At first, nothing looked wrong. There were boxes stacked along one wall, a mop bucket sitting in the corner, and the dull shine of the floor under the harsh lights. Jake leaned in closer, feeling the others do the same. He was just about to say, "See? It's fine," when he noticed something in the far corner that hadn't been there before. It was a shadow. Not the kind that comes from a box or a person standing under a light, but the kind that looked too thick, too dark, too real. Slowly, it peeled away from the wall, stretching up and up like smoke standing upright. It had no face, no eyes, no clothes, nothing you could really name. It was just the shape of a person made from darkness. It floated closer to the camera one slow step at a time, like it knew every single one of them was watching and it wanted to be sure they saw. The shadow stopped right under the hallway camera. The lights above it flickered and dimmed, as if they were afraid to shine on it. The dark shape seemed to grow taller, its head almost brushing the ceiling. Jake felt his throat go dry. Before he could say anything, the screen split on its own, without Mr. Harris touching a thing. Now 2 camera feeds showed at once, the shadow in the hall on one side, and a new angle on the other. The second feed was the front counter camera. It showed the cash registers, the soda machine, and the open space behind the counter. And standing there, alone, was Jake. Or at least something that looked exactly like him. This other Jake stared straight up into the lens with eyes that were way too dark and a face that looked pale and wrong. "Jake, you're in there, but you're here," Emily whispered. Jake shook his head, his heart pounding. "That's not me," he breathed, watching his own double come to life on the screen like something from a nightmare. On the screen, the fake Jake slowly smiled. It wasn't Jake's usual shy, quick smile. It was wide and strange, pulled too tight, like the face was a mask and someone else was wearing it. Behind him, the kitchen looked wrong. The walls were darker, the fryer looked old and rusted, and the light had a sickly color, like it had been burned years ago and never healed. Marcus tried to calm himself, mumbling, "It has to be old footage, or a glitch," but Mr. Harris pointed at the timestamp on the bottom of the screen. The time and date were ticking forward right in sync with the clock on the wall. Then the whisper came. At first it was soft, like someone talking from far down a tunnel, easy to ignore if you tried. But it grew clearer, crawling closer, until it felt like a voice right next to Jake's ear. Every tiny hair on the back of his neck stood up. "Can you see us now?" it asked. Jake flinched and spun around, expecting to find someone right behind him. The office was empty except for his coworkers, who hadn't moved. On the monitor, the fake Jake's smile vanished, his head snapped to the side as if he heard the same voice, and dark smoke began to pour from his open mouth. "Turn it off. Turn it off, please." Emily sobbed, grabbing Mr. Harris's shoulder. His hand shook so badly he could barely hold the mouse. Before he could click anything, every camera on the screen exploded into white noise. Static filled each tiny box where the lobby, the hallway, and the counter had been. The office went quiet in a way Jake had never heard before. The buzzing lights stopped. The soft hum of the soda machine disappeared. Even the low rattle of the fridge in the back was gone. For a long second, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just four people holding their breath. Then Jake heard it. Footsteps. Slow, soft footsteps moving across the dining room floor just above their heads. Step, 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 each one careful and steady, as if whoever, or whatever, was walking knew exactly where they were. There's no one supposed to be out there, Jake thought, but that didn't matter. The steps kept coming, closer and closer, until they stopped right outside the office door. Mr. Harris looked at Jake, his eyes wide and frightened. "Go check," he whispered, like this was any other shift and Jake was just another worker doing a normal task. Before Jake could argue, before he could even think of a reason to stay where it was safe, something else answered for him. The doorknob began to turn. Very slowly. Very gently. No knock. No voice asking to come in. Just the cold, smooth twist of metal moving all by itself. All four of them froze and stared at the handle. It turned halfway, then paused as if the thing on the other side was testing it. Then it turned the rest of the way, and the latch clicked with a sound that felt way too loud in the dead quiet office. The door swung open with a soft, drawn-out creak. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His mind screamed at him not to look, but his eyes lifted anyway, and he saw something standing in the doorway that made his heart feel like it stopped. In the doorway stood a tall figure made of shadows, darker than the dark hallway behind it. It was shaped like a person but had no clear edges. Its body moved like smoke drifting underwater. Where its face should have been, there was only deep blackness, except for two tiny, glowing white spots that burned like cold stars. Jake could feel the temperature in the office plunge so fast that when he breathed out, he could see his own breath hanging in the air. The shadow stepped into the room, and every instinct in Jake's body screamed to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Emily clung to his arm, shaking hard. Marcus tried to stand in front of them like he wanted to protect everyone, but his hands were trembling. Mr. Harris, his voice barely more than a breath, tried to sound like a manager in control. "Who's there? What do you want?" he asked. The answer didn't come in words from a mouth. It came as a low, cold whisper that filled the room, the air, and Jake's chest at the same time. "We want to be seen." The monitors, which had been nothing but static, flicked back on all at once. Now every screen showed a different angle of the McDonald's, but it wasn't the McDonald's they knew. In the lobby feed, the walls were stained black, as if they had been burned long ago and never cleaned. The play area plastic was twisted and melted into sad, sagging shapes. Tables were broken, chairs were bent and scattered, and the floor looked dark and dirty, like it was still wet with something you didn't want to name. In the kitchen feed, the fryers looked rusted and ancient. The grill was cracked, and the tiles on the floor were stained a deep, ugly color. The lighting was wrong too. Everything had a sick, gray tone, as if the whole restaurant was trapped in some other time where the fire never fully went out. Jake kept glancing at the real walls around him, bright and clean and normal, and then back at the screens. It was like the cameras were pointed into a different version of the building, a bad past, or a warning of what it really was underneath the fresh paint. On one of the burned lobby screens, Jake saw something that made his heart clench. People. They weren't solid like living bodies. They were faded and gray, like fog holding human shapes. Some wore old McDonald's uniforms from years ago, with a logo design he'd only seen in old pictures. Others looked like customers, their coats and bags ghostly and dull. They sat at the charred tables with their heads bowed, faces shadowed, as if they were stuck in the last moment they were alive. In the middle of them all, at the table where the untouched tray had appeared earlier that night, sat a little girl with short hair and a striped shirt. Her legs swung above the burned floor, not quite reaching it. In her hands, she held a Happy Meal box that was blackened along the edges, as if it had been through the fire with her. Slowly, she lifted her head and looked straight at the camera. Even worse, it felt like she was looking straight through the screen and into the tiny office, right at Jake himself. A cold wave rushed over him as the whisper curled around his mind again. "Do you see them? Do you see us now?" The shadow's glowing eye spots slid from Emily, to Marcus, to Mr. Harris, and then locked onto Jake. As it stared, Jake felt something shove at his thoughts, like icy hands pressing against the inside of his skull. He gasped, dropping to one knee as images flooded into his head. Suddenly, he wasn't in the office anymore. He was in the same restaurant, but it was long ago. The uniforms were different. The menu boards were different. The place buzzed with the sound of kids in the play area and customers calling out orders. Then he heard it, a loud popping noise from the kitchen, followed by a strange, sharp smell. Someone shouted, "Fire! Fire in the kitchen!" Flames shot up near the fryers, racing up the walls, licking the ceiling tiles like hungry tongues. People screamed and crashed into tables as they tried to run. Kids cried, their voices high and scared. Someone slammed into the front door, but it didn't open, it was stuck. In the chaos, Jake saw the little girl in the striped shirt, Maddie, coughing hard as thick smoke wrapped around her. She tried to reach the door, but the heat pushed her back. Her Happy Meal box slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. The lights blinked, and then everything went black. The vision snapped away like someone yanking a plug out of a wall. Jake found himself back in the office, stumbling as if he'd been pushed. Emily caught him by the shoulders. "Jake, what happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. He was breathing hard, his heart racing so fast it hurt. For a moment, he couldn't form words. The burned ghosts, the fire, the screaming Maddie at the door, it all sat heavy on his chest. Finally, he forced the words out. "There was a fire," he whispered. "In this building. A long time ago. People got trapped. That's why they're here." The whisper in the room shifted, now sounding more like a sorrowful sigh than a threat. "We burned. No one listened. No one cared," it breathed. Mr. Harris, pale as paper, swallowed and admitted what he'd never told them. The restaurant had been rebuilt 10 years ago after an accident. He had seen old files, but the company told them not to talk about it. As he spoke, frost slowly formed along the edge of the metal desk, and the shadow's eyes burned brighter, not just angry now, but hurt. The shadow stared at Mr. Harris like it could see all the secrets locked inside his head. The air grew so cold that it hurt to breathe. "You locked us in, you shut the doors, you erased our names," the whisper accused, wrapping around his words like smoke. Mr. Harris shook his head quickly, his voice cracking as he said, "I wasn't here. That was before me. I didn't do that." The whisper hissed, sharper now, vibrating in the office walls. "But you stayed, you took their place, you feed them." The screens flickered, and the ghostly figures in the burned lobby all turned their shadowed faces toward the cameras. Their mouths opened in silent screams that no one could hear. Marcus snapped under the pressure. "We're getting out of here," he said, grabbing the office chair and shoving it through the shadow. The chair passed straight through like it was moving through mist and slammed into the wall. The shadow tilted its head, watching him with something that wasn't quite anger, but definitely wasn't kind. Marcus pressed himself back against the filing cabinet, whispering, "I'm done. I quit." I quit this job. I'm out. Jake knew he couldn't fight a ghost with fists or chairs. They needed another way, one that made sense to the dead. Jake remembered something his grandma used to tell him when he was little and afraid of the dark. Dark can't win when the light is strong. The lights in the building were already on, but the cameras were still showing the darker world underneath. Maybe, he thought, the light they needed wasn't a bulb. Maybe it was the truth. You want people to see you? Jake asked the shadow, his voice shaky but brave. You want them to know what happened here? The whisper swirled around him like a cold wind, answering, yes. Then let us show them, Jake said. Let us take the video. Let us tell your story. We'll send it out. People will know about the fire. About you. About everything. For a moment, the room became even colder, as if the ghost was thinking. Then Mr. Harris, with trembling hands, opened the file cabinet. From the bottom, he pulled out a thick, worn folder he was never supposed to keep. Inside were yellowed reports and old newspaper clippings. A headline screamed, "Fire at local fast food restaurant kills 6." Names and black and white faces filled the pages. Daniel, Maria, and Madison, Maddie, Lane, age 8, the little girl with the striped shirt. Jake felt the weight of their story pressing down on him. They read through the reports together. One page talked about an oil spill near the fryer, another about a fire door that got stuck, and another about how the company regretted the accident and promised better safety. Then, just a few pages later, the tone changed. The words focused on remodeling and refreshing the building. New paint, new equipment, new branding. No mention of ghosts. No mention of lives lost. It was like someone had taken an eraser and wiped the dead right out of the story. They buried it, Jake said quietly. They pretended it was nothing. They opened back up like people didn't die here. Emily looked up at him, eyes shining with tears. What are we going to do? She asked. Jake glanced at the black screens, remembering the shadow's last words. Midnight, we will watch. He felt a strange courage rise in his chest. They wanted us to see, he said. Now maybe they want everyone to see. Mr. Harris, after a long, heavy sigh, said what none of them expected from a manager. We're not supposed to share footage or talk to anyone. But after this, I don't care what they say anymore. The next day, Jake sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, waiting. His mom thought he was just chatting with new friends from work. She didn't know about the files, or the fire, or the shadow that had filled the office. When the screen finally flicked on, he saw Emily on one side, looking tired, and beside her a girl with glasses and a serious face. This was Lily, Emily's cousin, the one who made YouTube videos about real haunted places and true stories. Hi, Jake, Lily said, giving a small wave. She told him she had watched some of the footage they sent. The tray that showed up by itself, the chairs moving, the soda machine buttons flashing. She explained that she'd seen lots of fake ghost videos, wires pulling chairs, edited shadows, fake whispers. But this was different. If this is fake, she said, shaking her head, it's better than anything I've ever seen. And I don't think it's fake. Jake felt both scared and oddly proud. It's not fake, he told her. We were there. We lived it. Lily shared her screen to show them the clips again. On the call, they watched the lobby tray appear in the middle of an empty room, then the chairs sliding out like invisible people were sitting down. They watched the soda machine flash in a pattern no one had programmed. She paused before the worst parts. The shadow, the fake Jake, the moment the ghost stepped into the office. I can add the old news clippings, she said. I can talk about the fire, show the names and faces of the people who died. I can tell everyone how your company tried to hide it. But if I post this and it goes big, your lives might change. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Mr. Harris stayed late after his shift. He sat alone in that same office, plugging in a flash drive and quietly backing up every piece of footage he could find. The moving tray, the chairs, the hallway shadow, the doppelganger at the counter. He made copies and then copies of the copies, determined not to lose anything this time. The flash drive on the desk looked small, but it carried the weight of last night's terror, and maybe, just maybe, the ghost's only chance to finally be believed. By the time they finished cleaning and copying files, The sky outside was empty and black, with only a few streetlights glowing over the parking lot. The restaurant looked normal again when they walked through the lobby. Clean floors, flipped chairs, the faint smell of fries and ketchup still hanging in the air. No burned walls. No ghosts at tables. No shadows in the play area. If someone walked in right then, they'd never guess what that building had shown them hours before. But Jake felt eyes on him. Just before stepping out, he turned and looked up at the security camera in the corner. For a split second, he thought he saw a tiny shadow standing just beneath it, the faint outline of a little girl. It didn't move. Maybe it was his imagination. Maybe not. "We're going to tell your story," he whispered under his breath. "I promise." The other three joined him at the doors. They locked up. The alarm beeped and set. From the outside, the McDonald's on Maple Avenue went completely dark, like any other closed fast food place in the middle of the night, if you didn't know what was really inside. All that night, even after he left the glowing building behind, Jake felt like he was still being watched. The words, "Midnight, we will watch," hung in his mind like a warning and a promise. Back in the quiet lobby, with no humans inside, the security camera watched the empty tables and chairs like it always did, its red light blinking softly in the dark. If you looked very closely, just under that camera, the shadows near the wall seemed a little too thick, a little too still, as if something small and patient was standing there, listening. Jake didn't see that part with his own eyes. But he felt it. He sensed the ghosts weren't done with him yet. They had trusted him with their story now. They had shown him the fire, the deaths, the truth that got buried under fresh paint and company rules. And even though he had left the building, he had not left them. Somewhere between the security camera lens and his promise whispered into the air, a connection had formed. It would follow him home, whether he was ready or not. At 11:58 p.m., Jake woke up without knowing why. His room was dark, lit only by the tiny green numbers on his alarm clock. The house was quiet. He could hear a car passing faintly outside and the steady hum of the fridge in the kitchen. He rolled over, pulling the blanket up, telling himself to go back to sleep. His brain was tired, but his body felt tense, like it knew something was coming and was waiting for it. Then he heard a soft click. It sounded like a button being pressed, even though he hadn't touched anything. At the foot of his bed, his small TV, one he rarely used, flicked on by itself, filling the room with a cold blue glow. The remote sat untouched on his desk across the room. Static crackled across the screen for a few seconds, white noise hissing into his dark bedroom. Jake sat up slowly, his heart thudding harder with every passing second. "This can't be happening," he whispered to himself, but deep down he already knew this was exactly what the ghosts had promised. The static on the TV shifted, breaking apart like fog in the wind. Behind it, a picture formed. Jake stared, frozen, as he realized what he was seeing. It was the inside of the McDonald's on Maple Avenue. Camera 3. The same lobby view they had watched from the office. The same tables and chairs. The same play area windows. Except now it was even darker, lit only by a faint glow from some unseen light. No customers. No workers. Just that restaurant, alive on his bedroom TV in the middle of the night. At the bottom of the screen, a timestamp read 11:59 p.m. The image dimmed a bit, as if someone inside the restaurant was slowly turning the lights down lower. One of the chairs in the lobby moved. Then another. Then another. Slowly, each chair turned to face the camera, one by one, like invisible people were sitting in them and turning their attention right toward Jake. In his room, he could feel their silent stares pushing through the glass. It was like he was the one on camera now, and they were the audience. Jake's mouth went dry as he watched the lobby on his screen. The little green numbers on his nightstand clicked over to 12 o'clock, and at the exact same second, the timestamp in the corner of the TV display changed to 12 a.m. midnight. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't old footage. It was happening right now. He could barely breathe as he leaned closer, like something might jump out if he blinked. Then the whisper came again, but this time it didn't echo through restaurant speakers. It came straight from the TV in his bedroom. "We told you, we will watch." The voice slid out of the speakers like cold smoke, curling around his bed, sinking into the walls. The chairs on the screen stayed perfectly still now, all facing the camera, like a silent crowd waiting for the next part of a show. Only this time, Jake understood that he wasn't just the storyteller. He was part of the story whether he liked it or not. On the TV, a dark shape appeared at the edge of the lobby view. At first, it was just a deeper patch of shadow near the play area, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But Jake couldn't look away. Slowly, the shadow stretched and rose, taking on the now familiar shape of a tall, thin figure made of living darkness. No face. No details. Only two glowing white points where eyes should be. It stepped into the center of the frame, standing between the turned chairs and the camera, just like it had stood between them and the screens back in the office. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying him through the lens. Even though it was miles away inside the restaurant, it felt like it was standing right in front of his bed. The whisper grew louder, filling his room, pressing against his skin. Now, it breathed, "It's your turn." The shadow took another step toward the camera. On the screen, its form started to blur and stretch, like it was walking straight toward the glass, trying to push through it into whatever world lay beyond. The TV flickered, the image warping like a bad signal, but the shadow stayed clear, too clear. Its long, smoky arms seemed to reach out of the screen itself. The glowing eyes locked onto Jake's face, and he felt the temperature in his bedroom plummet the same way it had in the office. His breath fogged in front of him. His blankets suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds, pinning him in place as the thing came closer and closer. Static crackled around the edges of the picture as the shadow pressed against the inside of the TV, its form flattening for a moment, then bulging forward as if the thin glass couldn't fully hold it back. The whisper curled all around him now, above him, below him, inside his ears and deep in his chest. "Now, it's your turn to be seen," it said, as the dark shape on the screen stretched toward him, reaching for his room, his bed, his life, and everything Jake thought he understood about where the haunting ended and where he began started to rip apart.